Hello, all you superhumans out there. We're talking about Dolores Cannon. This is part 2 in my series about Dolores Cannon talking to Nostradamus. And if you didn't catch part 1, go back and review because it's really interesting to listen how she connected to Nostradamus and connected to Nostradamus through at least, I think, 3 or 4, maybe even more people. And she could pick up where she left her conversation behind. Can you imagine having a conversation yourself with some distant person somewhere in time? And you can bring somebody in, place them down, they go into the QHHT theta state, and then you ask these questions. You get all kinds of answers that can actually be validated, where information can be found, which was Dolores's experience in part 1. And then, as people would fall away, she could actually bring in somebody else, put them in the theta state, and pick up where she left off. And the 2 people, or the 3 people, or the 4 people, or the 5 people that she's been talking to in the theta state have no contact with each other. And yet, she could go through and even reference back to prior conversations. And he would often chastise her, because he was a bit, what do they call, misogynistic? So anyway, I might have said that word wrong. I apologize. Anyway, I'm not big on labels. All right, so this is part 2. What are some of the most famous predictions have come true? And if you guys have not yet picked up the book, Dolores Cannon and her conversations with Nostradamus, I encourage you to do so. I will leave a link in the description box below that will take you to Amazon so you can buy those books. So here we go. We're going to start with, what are some of the most famous predictions that have come true? We'll get through that and we'll comment here in a minute.
And he told us exactly where they went in history. And from his time to ours, there were hundreds that had dealt with the past as we consider the past. He said, don't worry about those because they'll only be interesting to people who are interested in history. Focus on the next 20 years. And this was from the 80s when we were doing this. But in those, there was tremendous amount of things that have already come true. He even named Pasteur in one of the quatrains by name. And the famous Hister quatrains, there were many of those, but I even found out more quatrains dealing with Hitler besides just that one. He had all the phases of all the wars from his time to ours, and he had many, many inventions, which he called by the names of metal beasts and, fish, like submarines, like metal fish, because he didn't know what else to call them. He predicted air flight. He was very definite about a lot of these things. And he had many predicting the atomic bomb that have never been interpreted till now. One I thought was interesting was where he talked about the stone in the tree. The stone being the bomb, and the tree, how we always think of the bomb as represented by a mushroom cloud. To him, it looked like a tree. And in the quatrain, he talked about the stone in the tree as the explosion of the atomic bomb. But not only did he talk about wars and inventions, he talked about every philosophical trend that man would go through. These are all very important to him. So there were many, many that have already occurred. And since I began working with him, and the books were first published in 1989, so it's on record before the Gulf War began, he gave us the dates for the beginning of the Gulf War 3 times. And he talked about Saddam Hussein in anagram form before the Gulf War ever started. And parts of this have not come true yet. So we know we're not finished with Saddam Hussein or the wars in the Middle East. But many of the events in the last few years have been documented before they occurred. We were given the ones for the fall of the Berlin Wall. We had 3 quatrains that were explained to us before the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was very definite about the wall in the East will fall. And we were told about the breakup of the communist countries, that they would pull away from Russia, some peacefully and some violently, to where Russia would be reduced to the original size of Russia and Siberia. And all these things have come true since my work began with him. So there are many, many of these have come true. And we're now going into the fourth printing of volume 1. So much has happened that I've added an addendum, 50-page addendum to the back of the book of events that have just come true in the last year alone. And it's really amazing. And a lot of it has to do with computers, World Wide Web. These were very definitely predicted. He didn't call it World Wide Web, but he talked about the world being hooked together with wires all over the world dealing with computers. And a lot of these predictions are very frightening because they are coming true. And I thought maybe in 100 years, but now in less than 10 years, the things he saw about computers and experimental weaponry are happening in our lifetime. So it is now, it's right up to the minute. Nostradamus said, if we can just get through the decade of the 90s, we'll be okay. See, he saw this horrible war that he referred to as the Third World War. And there were many, many predictions dealing with the third Antichrist that he saw that would be the instigator of the Third World War. And he said, if you can just get through the 90s, he called this the time of troubles. Just get through this without going into this war. Keep it on the lesser scenario, the less violent scenario, will be fine. Because after the year 2000, we're going to be going into wonders you cannot even believe. But he saw the possibility of a terrible war that would be not only atomic, but biological weapons, chemical weapons, germ warfare, the most horrible things you can imagine that he verified for us. And some of these things I thought, well, it sounds like science fiction. But he said, no, it's already invented, and your scientists are working on them.
All right, let me stop her there. That's really interesting that she talks about this. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my mouse. All right. So when she's talking about book 4 and the conversations with Nostradamus, and it's going into print, this is 1996, 1997 time frame. Now, she says that once we get to the 2000s, it'll be, smooth sailing. Well, that's not quite true. It hasn't been. But we are talking about the chemical and the germ warfare. We are talking about all of that. But we are going to be headed into the 1,000 years of peace. And I just wanted to kind of give you some context. When she says that the Antichrist hasn't come yet, we don't know who that is. And when she is talking, this video is 1996, 1997. So we'll go ahead and finish up.
But I let that go until I began to get letters and phone calls from people saying it's not fiction. I know because we're working on these things. So we're sitting right now at a very volatile time. We could go into this most horrible war, or we could stay like we are. But if we can get through the 90s, then we will go into the 1,000 years of peace after we're into the year 2000. Because he saw a figure coming along at that time that he called the great genius. Now, if the Antichrist is the epitome of evil, of everything that is terrible, he said this great genius would be the total opposite. Because he said the pendulum cannot swing all the way to the very evil man and stay there. Must swing back to balance. And when it does, it comes into the time of the great genius. And he will have such wondrous inventions. We will be living in space, traveling in space, having space colonies. The human body will be perfected to the point that it will never die, and we'll be in the 1,000 years of peace. So this is
Let me stop you there. This is interesting. I kind of forgot she talked about this. She talked about, oh, crikey. I struggle with technology. All right, so the great genius. It sort of makes you wonder, are we talking about maybe Elon Musk? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. He sort of fits that narrative. I mean, he is beyond smart. I guess we all have our opinions about Elon. So, and you know, on this channel, I don't get into the negativity. Um, so draw your own conclusions. Kind of look and see, where does the great genius, who do you pull in that might fit that role? But it is interesting because we do have some people that I will not mention on this channel that comes to mind that I feel fit the role for genius, that fits the times. Um, but anyway, yeah, let me continue on with this. Here we go.
The time I like to focus on, rather than the terrible things he saw. He said he wanted us to know there was a wonderful future ahead of us. We can just get through the end of the 90s. He said there will be more things happening in the 90s, more significant events than have ever happened in the history of the world before. And I like to say it reminds you of the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. But he believed that we chose to live here at this time because he said by living now, you could work off as much karma in one lifetime as you would normally take 10 lifetimes to do. This is why we have so much happening all the time, so much coming at us from all directions. We're trying to work off a great deal of karma at this time. But he said you chose to be here, and it can really be very good for the people if they will stick with it and do it. But the
All right, I'm going to leave it at that right now because it is very true. I work with a lot of clients that are doing a lot of struggle with what she says. It is intense times. People have really had a hard time in the last, 6, 7 years, where we seem to be swinging one direction extremely and swinging the other direction extremely. And what we need to find is some balance and some common sense, and where we can kind of all kind of gather, take a deep breath, and lift each other up and know that none of us are victims. Well, we might have been victimized, but we don't have to live our life as victims. And as we go into this new age that Nostradamus talks about through Dolores Cannon, that is the one thing that comes through my QHHT patients, clients all the time. And that is the reminder that we are on the brink of our 1,000 years of peace. And all this nonsense, this extremism that's going on, that seems to be polarizing everybody, will begin to balance out again. As she states, and as my clients state, it's a balancing of karma. And in addition to many of us who have chosen to incarnate now, to have the vision of what is actually taking place and participating in the now times, we're working off a lot of stuff that is preparing not only the world around us and future generations, but our own souls that are prepared for what I want to call the 1,000 years of peace. So it's all working together. It's all doing really nice. Let's go ahead and finish up with this one segment. I don't want to cut you short, so let's finish up.
great genius, that is part of what's going in the addendum.
Genius.
The internet has been very helpful with this
Who is it?
because Nostradamus saw the next wave of computers. The first one was going to be would operate by voice, which they're working on now. The next ones would be by thought. And I've heard that this is being worked on. But during the time of the great genius, there would be an organic computer, and that it would be able to duplicate human parts, duplicate human bodies. And he saw the great.
All right, let me stop you there. This is really important because since this time when she recorded this, we now know that DNA, everything is stored in our DNA. There have been studies done within our DNA that DNA, that basically a dropper, just a little drop on your finger, can hold like 1 billion supercomputers. That is how much storage our DNA holds itself. And this sort of lens, in 1997, she's having 96, and those 10 years in having these continued conversations with Nostradamus, how he's telling us that these computers are becoming organic. And as these the computers are coming online, the quantum computers, and being able to understand how we are storing information, even in water. And we're going to get into that in future videos, and we're going to tie it all together. So please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a future upload of this. Let's continue on, and let's get to the end of this segment. Hold on.
Genius as transferring his intellect into this computer,
And
so
it
would
happens.
be there to guide us through the thousand
We'll
years
talk
of
about
peace.
that.
We'll also be running all the power that will power the world and the space stations. But on the internet, I found out that they are working now on computers based on DNA, that they say they will be 1,000,000 times faster and more accurate than anything we have now, because of the way that the DNA transfers information. This is how they will be able to transfer information using the same thing, because they have gone as small as they can go with chips. The next step is cellular. So they said everything is going to go down to the tiny, tiny level of cells. And this is all in the field called nanotechnology. Nano meaning very, very tiny. And it's amazing because we were given this information 10 years ago, and it's happening now. It's all coming about. That he said that the great genius would transfer his knowledge into this. They say this is very possible because all it is energy. And it'd be very possible within the next several decades anyway.
So there you are. Didn't we just say that? Isn't that beautiful that she actually had that conversation?
It is an interesting question that what happens with all.
Sorry about that. We'll get to that later. I'm so sorry. It's just me and computers. This is amazing. She talked about this in 1997. She'd been talking about it for the past 10 years, going into biological, the nanotechnology, and transferring his consciousness. Now, this is something I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Elon Musk has said that he wants to try to do. But he's also very cautious, and he's a little bit skittish now about what they call transhumanism. And what she doesn't know that she's talking about now is transhumanism. Nostradamus picks it up, living in the 14th, 15th century of France. Through his consciousness, he is having a conversation with a woman in the 20th century who is recorded and giving us information through at least 4 volumes of having a conversation with Nostradamus, talking about things that are becoming mainstream in 2024. And we're going to get into more of it, about these predictions that she is talking about in 97, and how it all ties into today, and how it affects you, and what you can do to harness that power that is within your own DNA. And you don't have to give your sovereignty over to anybody. Remember, you are powerful beings. Do not let anybody take away your sovereignty. And let's ignite the superhuman in you. If you would like a session, please reach out to me at sallyknott.com, book a private session, and we can talk about all kinds of things: energy healing, QHHT, remote viewing. And if you could, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. It helps us get the message out, because it's all about igniting you and making you a powerful individual, because it doesn't belong just to one person. It belongs to you too. With that said, take care for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.